right, good day to everybody. This is Bill with Bill and Teona whining about the region, and this is our political minute. Right now, there's a lot going on in this country. There's a lot of primaries going on, but eyes are focused. Eyes are really focused on North Carolina today because they have a primary. There's a lot going on in this presidential primary, and I wanted to speak with somebody who could give me a little bit more insight that's familiar with that part of the country. So today we have Ameena Mohyuddin Zia, and she currently serves as a social impact consultant and NGO UN representative at the Economic and Social Affairs Committee, and is responsible for engagement through what is called a multi-stakeholder approach. So I do want to just put your hands together and welcome Ameena Mohyuddin Zia. Clap. All right, Ameena, you there?
I'm here. Thank you, Bill.
Wonderful.
Thank you for that warm welcome.
Absolutely. We're glad to have you today. Now, I do want to first start off by asking you, what is your connection to North Carolina?
Well, Bill, I was raised in North Carolina. I grew up in North Carolina, went to college in North Carolina, undergrad and grad school, and my first job out of college was in North Carolina. So I have a very long history with North Carolina, and now I am very glad and fortunate to be back here with my family, my two little daughters, and my husband, and as we have settled in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Western North Carolina.
All right. Well, that's great to hear. So let's get right into the meat of this. All right. So today, like I said earlier, is an important day in electoral politics as literally 12 states hold their presidential primaries. And we have seen an increase in attention given this election cycle to these primaries because they're so significant. There's been so much competition. We've had some folks drop out over the past few days and show their support for one candidate or the other for president. And I understand as a professor and researcher of comparative politics, you're closely observing what's been happening in North Carolina today. So give us a lay of the land, like what's going on, what are your thoughts, and why is North Carolina so important in today's primary season?
Thank you, Bill. North Carolina voters actually are getting a chance to weigh in on the primary today that could and potentially will solidify the Democratic presidential nomination. So that in itself is pretty significant, So
absolutely.
And having, Super Tuesday contests taking place across the country, North Carolina is a significant player in the electoral space this election cycle. Because it has more delegates than most other early primary states. And keep in mind that, candidates are looking for that magic number of delegates to secure their party's nomination. And to be exact, that number is 1,990 delegates. And each state is worth a certain number. I do want to say that the stakes are definitely high. We have observed that both Republicans and Democrats have not taken North Carolina for granted. President Trump has visited Charlotte twice in just 1 month of February to solidify his base. And then we've also witnessed, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, former Vice President Joe Biden, and former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, as they've made appearances in the area leading up to today. So certainly today's results will reflect how this region feels. There has been a lot of political shift in the last decade or so within the party politics in North Carolina. I grew up here, and at that time, the political game, the political landscape was very different, and the demographics were very different as well of this state. So, it remains to be seen how candidates will fare. But, Bill, regardless, the results will reflect a collective voice of North Carolinians, I believe, especially in this presidential primary.
All right. Well, we have, states like Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, which, are all very important southern states, and we have seen candidates give a tremendous amount of state attention to their bases in those states, and especially in North Carolina. So share a little bit about the impact of making the primary earlier and essentially moving it from May to March. Explain the impact of something like that on internal political dynamics.
Absolutely. Bill, for North Carolina, the primary this election cycle is scheduled earlier than usual. And a big motivator for changing the primary date was to ensure that the state actually had a voice in deciding the direction of the presidential primary. I would like to add that North Carolina isn't the only state that has moved up their primaries to Super Tuesday. We have witnessed states like California, Utah, and Maine who have also changed their dates in order to allow their state to have more influence in choosing a party's candidate. I will point out that on the state and local level, of course, there are ramifications from front-loading the primary to March, right? Since all the ballot down races in North Carolina offices have also been moved up, which, from a campaign strategy point of view, no doubt favors incumbents since candidates have had roughly 2 months to actually campaign since the official filing for nomination date, which was in December. So, there certainly is a cost associated with moving up the date from May to March. But the upside is that, North Carolina actually gets to decide the sway of the presidential primary.
All right. Well, let's talk about something interesting. And everybody in politics, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent, or, regardless of where you are on the spectrum, everybody's got their opinion, I'm sure. So let's talk about Mike Bloomberg, okay? Now he's garnered over 125 endorsements from local political leaders across the state. And, he's been really a latecomer to this political landscape. What insight can you share about his support in North Carolina?
Right. So, Bill, absolutely. He is no doubt a latecomer into the political space. And North Carolina serves essentially as a test for the Bloomberg campaign, I believe. Today's primary is the first time the campaign will receive some solid feedback about how voters actually view him. His campaign has invested heavily in North Carolina with opening up campaign facilities across the state. We've seen with about 125 paid staffers. I believe that's the number of staffers has been quoted, which, at this point is quite significant. And so, of course, let's not ignore the close to $10 million that has been spent on TV ads. And as you mentioned, the former New York mayor is receiving endorsements across the state from very well-respected politicians and community leaders that, have included former governors, mayors of larger cities like Charlotte and Raleigh, and Democratic leaders of the House and Senate. So, essentially by just looking at the traction or the connection he has to North Carolina or has made in North Carolina, one would assume he's quite a popular guy within state boundaries, right? But of course, it certainly remains to be seen how the Bloomberg campaign will end the night and what that would mean going forward in their strategy. Bill, if I can, I would like to add about Senator Sanders. We're noticing that he has drawn large crowds in North Carolina. And looking at campaign finance data just in the last 3 months of 2013, we have observed that he raised roughly $309,000 from donors across the state, and that in itself is more than any Democrat has secured in the past. So and I mean that's pretty significant. So as analysts, we talk about his biggest asset in the region as being his pluralist strategy, but he seems to be more concerned about what he is doing, his own thing, and North Carolina Democrats to some degree seem to be responding to that. So, as of right now, the Democratic cluster includes Biden, Sanders, Bloomberg, and where does Warren fit in, or does she fit in? It all remains to be seen.
Wow. Well, that's a lot to take in. I do appreciate you joining us. Again, this has been Ameena Mohyuddin Zia, and this is Bill with Bill and Teona's Wine About the Region, and this has been our Political Minute.
Thank you, Bill.